So who believed ABSA when they binned Project Savannah, which was all about switching the brand of ABSA to Barclays? Certainly the worst kept secret in the market has been the plan by Barclays to reduce or sell down its 62.3% stake in Barclays Africa over the next 2 years. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight we look at the divestment of Barclays for a second time, or its own Afrixit. That's a big word. This evening, joined by Nic Norman-Smith. Nic Norman-Smith is with Lentus Asset Management. And of course, we've got Sasha Naryshkine. Sasha Naryshkine is with Vestact. Now, before we get into the big issues, here is a view from the relatively new Barclays chief executive, Jess Stanley. Jess Stanley is an American. He is an investment banker at heart. And toward the end of last year, we saw the board of Barclays bullet the pro-Africa chief executive. 3 months later, Jess Staley, the American, moved in. This is what he had to say to CNBC earlier today about Barclays' interest in Barclays Africa.
We own 62% of Barclays. There's a very strong shareholder base in Africa. There's a very strong institutional base. We're going to give ourselves 2 to 3 years to sell to a deconsolidated, non-controlling position in Barclays. In Barclays Africa. There's a lot going on in the continent. It's a terrific franchise. Barclays Africa has got a great management team. There will be a lot of shareholder interest in Barclays, but we will do it prudently and over a safe period of time.
There we go, Jess Staley, the chief executive of Barclays. So what is the future then for Barclays Africa? Didn't Old Mutual say 7, 8 years ago that they were ready to sell Old Mutual? And oh yes, they still control, Old Mutual to sell Nedbank, of course, they still control Nedbank. Let's get the views. Nic Norman-Smith, what is the future of Barclays Africa, or should we just start calling it ABSA again?
Yeah, perhaps save them some money on the rebrand, I guess, but it's not a good time to be selling assets, absolutely, and they can spin it and say, well, it makes no difference because it's just a shareholder. But remember, banks are all about confidence, and the banks' raw material is capital, and if you've got a big shareholder like Barclays behind you, your cost of capital is going to be lower than if you've potentially got somebody else. And just the uncertainty isn't great. I mean, they've come out, they haven't said to what level they're going to sell.
But that's the point. They're ready to divest, but they're intimating they're prepared to keep a minority stake, which is bizarre. Why would you, Sasha Naryshkine?
Particularly bearing in mind when of their big 4 businesses, it's the smallest. So, I don't know, maybe maintain some sort of presence with a view to coming back one day. It's not as if they haven't done that before, is it, Bruce?
No, a couple of times.
So, a bit of history here, I think. So, when did they buy it? In the second half of 2005?
Yep.
Nic and I were talking off camera about the numbers. They paid effectively 6.90 pence a share.
60 rand a share, thereabouts?
82.50.
82.50? Your memory is so good.
No, I wrote it down.
Thank you. As good as you did, because one of us had to.
And then now they're exiting at effectively somewhere around 6.50 pence. So it looks like a loss, but they paid nearly 74 rands worth of dividends along the way. If you add that all back in, you're looking at about nearly 10 pounds.
So they almost made back their money on their investment through dividends over 10 years. So the sale is going to be a £6 billion profit for them. In the world of Barclays, £6 billion isn't all that much money, probably. But there's a regulatory environment, a global regulatory environment that is really awkward for them. They've got to account for all of this Africa stuff. They've got to keep capital for this Africa stuff. And the African continent suddenly is a lot less of an attractive place than it might have appeared to have been in 2005.
So what's the new joke? So back then it's like, what is your Africa strategy? And then everyone's sweating, I've got to have one. Now it's like, what is your Africa strategy? And it's like, avoid.
Yes.
I like to always look at the Economist covers as great contrarian indicators. So 2001, the hopeless continent,
yep,
with some guy with a gun and Africa was dead. Probably the best time to invest into Africa for the last 50 years. 2013, almost at the top, Africa Rising.
Yes.
So and Barclays didn't quite get it that wrong. I guess they bought in 2005. But
they did buy the extra stake in 2013, the African stake.
Yeah, they did indeed.
But it's so messy, isn't it? I mean, from a South African perspective, from an African perspective. So here's Maria Ramos now. She's got this African footprint for Barclays Africa, which is good. But now she's got the uncertainty as to whom she will be reporting, and how that is going to work. Now, Do banks need a controlling shareholder? Standard Bank doesn't. Standard Bank's got a minority shareholder in ICBC.
They're underwater.
And ICBC is underwater. We've got Nedbank, which has got Old Mutual as a controlling shareholder for now. We've got Barclays Africa, which has got Barclays for now. And then we've got the First Rank Group, of course, which is massively diversified shareholder base. So you don't need a controlling shareholder. So we could see the 62.3% stake, 62.6% stake quite widely spread.
But who's going to own it? Eh? Who's going to step up? Because this is like 70 billion rand.
So you look at it, so obviously there's the PIC, but they're not going to be able to take it all up. People talk about Atlas, is it Atlas Mara?
Yes,
Bob Diamond, the old Barclays CEO, who was quite involved with the
He's got an Africa strategy.
He's got $300 million, so that's not enough, but maybe he'll buy a stake. So that's potential. But if you look at all the other global banks, so let's look at some of the emerging market-focused banks. So it would fit perfectly to someone like a Standard Chartered.
Yep.
But they're in too much trouble. They've just raised $5 billion. So all these banks have capital requirements. No one's got the money. They're all trying to lower their loan books and they're trying to sell off. So Standard Chartered not going to touch it. HSBC is under pressure. All the European banks are under pressure. The US banks look unlikely. So the Chinese banks are the only ones that could really be, if you wanted another bank to buy a big stake,
and we make the assumption that the Chinese banks are looking into, are going to be interested,
and
they're in shape to do it.
Their economy is under pressure. They've just lowered their reserve requirement, or the government has, to try and promote. So they're telling banks you can hold less capital. Please lend. Please help us out. So
locally, domestically in China.
Yeah. So they're not looking great there. So it's not the time to be selling assets. And when you're a forced seller, look at what else has Barclays sold over time. So they sold their iShares business, their big ETF business, to BlackRock just after the crisis because they had to. They needed capital. Yeah. What a terrible strategic move, because that is the future. If you look at the market, everyone's moving into these ETFs and it's all about having the big scale. So they sold that for a few billion, probably a similar amount to what they own in Barclays now, in Barclays Africa now. So that's, generally they often make the call at the wrong time.
If you think about it.
It's not the biggest check in the world, but
who wants it?
But who would want it? And if you're sitting in China and you're looking at ICBC's investment in Standard Bank and you're going,
dollar terms.
Why?
They paid like around 123 rand for Standard Bank.
Yeah.
And what's Standard Bank? Like 111?
Yeah.
And do you remember the rand-dollar exchange rate in October 2007? Anyone? But you'd probably bet it was around 7.50. So haven't had a particularly good time of it.
So where does it go then? I mean, they're giving themselves 2 to 3 years. They're being generous with themselves. What people who are watching this saying, you guys are all idiots. Well, you guys, because you're the commentators. You guys are idiots. This is all about Julius Malema, who threatened to go and occupy every Absa branch. This is all about Jacob Zuma. This is all about 9/12. This is all about a lack of faith in the future of South Africa. Can we dispel that one quickly?
Yeah. Bruce, do you remember, we're all old enough to remember 1986. We might have been quite young, but when the groot crocodile wagged his finger, South Africa actually defaulted.
Yes.
Right? So everyone gets anxious about our credit rating, and that's when businesses were leaving hand over fist. I mean, Barclays left. A whole lot of
But that was sanctions related. Wasn't that
but still,
that was heart issue rather than brain issue?
I think part of it is capital ratios and risks and concerns. I think those are real concerns. But you've got to say, if this was such a phenomenal business with such great prospects, they would make a plan to keep it, and they're not. So
if oil was at $100 a barrel, Nigeria was growing and Angola was growing and Ghana was growing and South Africa hadn't done 9/12, would they have kept it? That face suggests there's a bad smell in the room.
No, because I think in this business it's still all about South African business.
So 80% I think is
it's
South
even
Africa,
more than that. Yeah. I mean, from a revenue point of view, it's more than 85. So it's
but
still
on a 20-year view, the Africa story in 2005 looked very different to what it does today.
Yeah, I saw Mark Mobius on yesterday, and he was his very cheerful self. And they were asking him questions about Brazil. But they're going to impeach the president. The commentator was shouting at him, surely Brazilian valuations. He's like, well, how much lower do you want them to go? So I think, his point is they probably are big institutional shareholders there who have an emerging market mandate. You say, okay, alongside South African institutional shareholders, of which Barclays Africa doesn't have too many, and even if the PIC bumped their stake up by 10%, there'll be another 50% to sell. I worked it out, 1.9 million shares swap hands every day, so it'll take them 277 trading sessions to sell all of their shares, provided they were the whole market. So it's going to take a while.
But also the thing is, if you're a global investor in banks and you start looking at valuations, I mean, without being too crude, but look at Absa's at what I think 1.3 times book value. Standard Chartered's at 0.4. Barclays PLC is at 0.5. Credit Suisse and all the European banks are well below 1. So it's actually quite expensive to invest in a South African bank.
It's 3 times more expensive to invest in a South African bank than it is to go into a European
and granted, maybe some of those lists are justified.
Yeah, if you call 0.6% in the fourth quarter of last year growth, yes, we have growth. But yeah, so big decisions to be made. Now we've got massive uncertainty that is going to overhang Barclays Africa for the next 2 to 3 years until we get a resolution on this. That's not good for anybody because there's going to be no real interest by Barclays in the Absa franchise, and they're going to have to be sort of floundering by themselves. They've got to lose skills because they'll start pulling the Barclays people out at some point and redeploying them through the network. This is a period of deep uncertainty for Absa.
And banks, from a client perspective, not that there's going to suddenly be a run on Absa, but it is all about confidence. And clearly it is. If you see some of their tweets and their comments, they're saying, look, this is just our shareholder, nothing changes, etc., etc.
It's a good bank. It's a good business. It's there, and it's solid, and it's reliable.
But often perceptions are reality. And if people are sort of vacillating a bit about it, it can't be a good thing. So I don't think it's absolute terror, but it's not a good thing.
3 years from now, we sit here and we go, okay, that was an interesting 3 years for Absa.
We didn't buy those Absas. Yeah.
No, but here we go. If you own Absa shares today,
I would say, do you sell them? No. You've got to keep them at these low valuations. I mean, what did they pay? 10 rands in dividends last year, right? So, shave off your 50,
it's on a 7% yield.
15%. Yeah, exactly. And it trades below 9 times the earnings. How much worse can it get? Does it get to 100 rand a share? I don't know. I mean, I doubt it. Things have to go really, really wrong in probably a South African political context.
But isn't there an opportunity to flog your Absas now and buy something? Buy something
like what, Standard Bank?
Well, maybe.
We prefer Standard Bank.
You prefer Standard Bank? He prefers Standard Bank. So why not Standard Bank, Sasha?
We haven't bought any banks for
about 5 years.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah,
I don't think.
more than that.
My thanks to Sasha Naryshkine, who's director at Vestact, Nic Norman-Smith from Lentus Asset Management, and of course we heard also from Jess Staley, who is the new chief executive of Barclays. What an interesting scenario we find ourselves in. Since 2005, of course, Barclays has sucked out about 77 billion rands worth of dividends from Absa. The share price, though, in pound terms, is lower than what they paid for it in 2005. No wonder they don't want to stick around. That's all we've got time for this evening. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.